Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Better Body Radio, and we have our Coaches Corner episode, and today we have with us Calum Raistrick. Now, if you are in the fitness industry or even remotely interested in bodybuilding and physique-based training, unless you've been living under a rock, you will probably have come across today's guest. So Calum is co-founder of the Muscle Mentors, arguably the most respected team of body composition coaches and educators in the UK. Calum built the foundations of his reputation working at M10, regarded as the leading body transformation facility in the UK, helping everyday individuals achieve outstanding transformations. Fast forward to the present day, and Cal is one of the most sought after prep coaches by trainers, physique athletes, and bodybuilders around the UK and beyond. I've personally been working with Cal since March 2019 and couldn't recommend him highly enough. Cal, welcome to Better Body Radio.
Thank you for having me on, guys. Thank you. It's just a pleasure.
Awesome, and of course, coach to Mal as well. So we thought we'd bring Mal in to co-host today's episode as well, and just so she could be a little fly on the wall as well. Cool. So let's dive right in, shall we? So question one, let's start with a little bit of a rewind. So a quick glance at your Instagram nowadays, and it's quickly evident that the caliber of client that you work with, not everyone who either follows you currently or listens to this episode or any other podcast that you featured on will fully know about your beginnings in the industry. So could you tell the guys listening how you got into the industry and a bit more of your backstory?
Yeah, 100%. So university, I was pretending I was a rugby player for about 2 years and then realised I wasn't good at rugby, so stopped. But did a sports science-based degree at university, and then I was kind of toying with the idea before I got like heavily into the coaching side of going down like more of the business end of sport as opposed to the coaching side. And then after I finished uni, and I was like, all right, the perfect thing right now to kind of expand the love I've got for training is to qualify as a trainer and start doing that to some degree. So like just did my personal training diploma with Premier Training like most people other do. That was like 10 weeks or something crazy, and got a job in LA Fitness. For the first job was LA Fitness for a year and a half. Gym floor PT, like general population, just built that up, and then moved to like an independent facility that was in the same area. This is in Kent, in Tunbridge Wells, and called Halo Gym, or the gym back then, not the chain, the gym. It was just an independent gym, but it's basically a personal training facility with a public membership base as well. And coached there for about, again, like a year and a half. So it's 3 or so years of gym floor PT. And then the opportunity came up at M10. And as I was coaching at the second gym, like general population, but I was kind of more shifting towards body composition because that's just what I was passionate about. But it was general pop clients for the most part. Things were going well, and then I started coaching with James. Obviously, James was at M10 then. Now he works for us. And James kind of led me down the route of building a passion for that side of things, and I kind of used him as a bit of like a pedestal to kind of get where I wanted to be, in terms of like that was my motive, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to coach to the level that James was and be on that kind of platform. And then the opportunity came up at M10. Obviously, I knew James as a kind of mutual affiliation, and went for an interview, and then 4 weeks later we relocated and left my entire client base to start from scratch again in Nottingham. So that was that really. Then 3 years at M10, and I think anyone that's been to M10 will know, like it's a perfect platform for a coach to go and thrive in for 2 or 3 years, 3 or 4 years, however long it might be. But then obviously you get to a point where you want to move to kind of running your own ship and doing your own things, and it's always come to a point where you don't outgrow an environment, but your ambitions start to become different to that of potentially a business moving in another direction. So I wanted to be online based. Obviously I couldn't balance the two, so I had to make a decision. I loved my time at M10. It was a big kind of stepping stone in my career. And I met a lot of close friends there, and obviously coaches that I still know now very, very closely. So yeah, and then one thing led to another. Went online, obviously it was CR Physique back then, back in the CR Physique days, the original days. And then we had the podcast, we had the Muscle Mentors podcast all along. And Luke and I kind of got to the point where it was becoming so popular that we're like, we need to probably make this into some form of like actual affiliation in terms of coaching as well, because we've got this kind of network of people that are following us and listening to us. And then that's where the Muscle Mentors was born, really. When it first started, it was, but our intent was to, because he was called Biophysiques. His coaching business was called Biophysiques. I was CR Physique. And the intent was to kind of just grow the podcast as like an educational platform that was free, that was just us both passionate speaking about stuff we love. And then it got to a point where things kind of picked up enough where I was like, this makes sense to make it kind of a business venture as well.
Cool, yeah. Some of that stuff, so that's kind of interesting to hear some of that backstory. Just as a bit of an aside, like when you kind of went from, LA Fitness, and I imagine, I think Halo Gym, I think I recognize that as Ryan now.
Yeah, so it's been on quite a few of the videos that I've posted in the past, and that's where Luke actually trains himself, and Ryan trains there as well.
Got you. So yeah, I just wondered, like, in terms of when you went from, say, like LA Fitness, like these more commercial gyms, and then you moved into M10, which is more of a, well, I suppose it started out as a private facility, but now they do a bit of a hybrid thing from what I understand. They do have some benefit as well. What was the difference like, kind of going from that type of facility into somewhere like M10? Was it quite a stark contrast, or?
Yeah, I think like the way I liked and I wanted to run my business and the standards I wanted to bring into my business, even in the years past, like their value is aligned with mine in terms of how I like to operate and how I like to do things and how I like to coach. So that's why it was such an easy fit and transition. But it was kind of a case of when I was at the previous gym, that was an independent gym, and I was kind of just self-employed, working off my own back. There wasn't as much of an expectation to deliver, if that makes sense. Whereas when you move into an environment like M10, you're immediately put into a team environment, and you're expected to deliver X amount of results each month, or it's a growth environment where everyone does well, and if you're not doing well, you're going to be out of place. So like it does force you to level up to a great extent, and I think that was a big kind of push in the right direction for where I am now, to be honest.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually think a lot of new coaches coming into the industry would probably really benefit from an environment like that, because I think it's
100%, yeah, 100%.
It's resting the morals and to just get almost too comfortable. And I think if I had to look back at my own career, I mean, we've almost been doing this for 10 years now. I would have wished that I could have been in somewhere like that at the start. And I think any coach that kind of has went on their own in mostly commercial facilities, I think most of us looked at places like M10 and think that must be a great environment to kind of hone your craft, especially in those initial years.
Yeah.
It's also set you up for kind of where you guys went on to with the muscle mentors and everything you guys are doing with the education and podcast, etc. So to take that on a step then, like, in terms of when you were at LA Fitness, M10, whichever aspects of your journey it was, at what point did you realize that, coaching was the career you wanted to pursue?
Like I always loved it. And when I first started PT, I didn't really have like the 5-year plan. I didn't have that long-term vision. I was just kind of living week by week, and it was paying a wage that I could pay my rent with, and I could live comfortably with the lifestyle I like to live back then, which is basically like training and affording the food I could eat. So it was, everything was suited to what I did back then. And then as it started to grow and kind of the business started to grow in terms of like results and like the amount of people, the kind of people I was working with, and obviously the more people I was working with, it kind of built into, I can take this, where I want to take it. I can take this quite a long way. And that's what kind of led the fire to pushing other sides of the business. And I always wanted, like, ever since I was at M10, I always wanted to kind of take that concept of like education, coaching coaches, and like coaching coaches who also want to drive their own goals as well, like you guys, and people that want to prep and stuff like that. And that's what I was passionate about. So one thing led to another, and it kind of formed the Muscle Mentors as its baby, if that makes sense. Kind of merged into that. So like I always loved that body composition side. And even when I first started at LA Fitness, like I was very much focused on, I wanted to be the guy in the gym, like producing the results, getting the before and after photos, like working with as many people as I could. And it was successful within that time frame. But when you're working with general pop clients, there's a lot of other challenges that go into that kind of coaching that are far beyond just getting a before and after picture. Like there are a lot of other barriers that are there as well. And they're not necessarily, a lot of the clients aren't necessarily people that you say, I'd count my buck on that you're going to be an incredible transformation. It might just be like, they want to turn up and have a bit of a counseling session on a Monday morning, or, the priority for them isn't necessarily like crazy life-changing transformation. It's more so improving the quality of life as well. So I understood that, and that's kind of that's your bread and butter at the start. I think like that's the people that are going to pay your rent, and the people that are going to pay the lifestyle you live, are the people that want to turn up 3 times a week and be part of your week as a coach. But then over time, as I got more experience and I started producing more, I got more of the people that wanted to do the photo shoots, or I want to prep. And then I had my first prep client, and then I took my first prep client to stage, and I loved that. And I was like, right, I want to do this long term now.
Very cool. So, I mean, I know that you do still coach some general population clients, and you maybe don't post quite as much about it. Every now and then on your feed, you'll just see the odd gen pop guy pop on there, and the results obviously still fantastic, given that's what you did for such a long period of time. But I imagine that in the early days at M10, that was the majority of your clientele, like you said, the kind of gen pop, and not necessarily transformation clients. And I know that M10, they actually separate their gen pop clients from their transformation clients, probably for that very reason, that you're not going to back every single one of those individuals to get one of those jaw-dropping before and afters. And of course, that every coach wants those. They want those for their social proof and for building their business and everything else. But one thing I was kind of interested to know is, what were the biggest lessons that you've taken away from coaching that population, the gen pop, and what do you feel the biggest challenge was transitioning from coaching so many of those gen pop clients in person to now coaching essentially what's a lot more advanced clients and physique athletes online?
I think the biggest thing that a general population client will teach you at the start and through a long time throughout your career when you're training gym floor PT as well, is the ability to build rapport, but also like to have a very high level of communication. Because a lot of those clients they don't, for a general pop client, it's not necessarily how sexy can I make the programming, or how advanced can I make this or that, and how much can we dig into mechanics and stuff like that. Like a lot of it is just communicating and building trust and building rapport and getting them to trust you and communicating on their level, and starting to understand their pains and what their issues are, what their barriers are, and starting to overcome them. So it's I think you learn to be very, very patient as a coach, and I think you learn to be very good at listening as a coach, and I think you learn to be very good at communicating as a coach when you work with Gen Pop. And that also, the ability to be empathetic and the ability to be personable in your coaching then translates to all other parties. Because even like a contest prep client, they might be highly self-motivated, they might be very independent, but there'll be times within that coaching relationship where you as a coach need to step up and lead them and be that kind of stronger figure in their life that gives them direction and gives them kind of clarity and understands them in the struggles that they have. Although they are completely different to a Gen Pop client, it's still such an important skill. And I think a lot of people that go straight into online coaching and want to work with a specific type of person often kind of forget that fundamental part of coaching, that you are coaching people, you're not coaching robots, right? So people become robots after learning how to do things over years and years and years, whereas you are coaching people first and foremost. So communication is huge.
So I guess you'd probably say it's probably a fair statement that you kind of have to earn that right to get to a point where people and the type of client you attract is maybe someone who's maybe not quite as much of the lifestyle or the psychological factors in terms of really applying themselves to the fullest of their ability. And I think we've probably seen that for a lot of clients. Sometimes as you level up over the years, clients maybe start off a certain way, and often they will kind of match what you're able to give them as well. And as you level up as a coach over time, sometimes they actually come and level up with you. And unfortunately, like you've probably seen as well, sometimes people are not willing to take the next step up with you as a coach, and that's unfortunate. But I think everyone meets a coach at a certain time, and either it's going to work or it's not. And I don't think any coach, would you fair to say that not every coach has a 100% success rate? Has that been the case for you as well, I'd imagine?
Yeah, 100%. Like there are some things that don't work out, but they're for multiple reasons. And I've had a lot of cases in the past where the direction I've been pulling has kind of pushed some people away that I've had for years and years and years. That it's just not something I want to kind of. It sounds bad, but like time is precious after a while, and it's not something you want to pursue when you know that there are other people out there that want to specialize in that specific thing. And like for people that I had back when I was coaching at M10, there are a couple of guys and girls that I love coaching back then, but then it's like your goals now just don't reflect with the way I want to go, and my time is so precious that there will be someone else out there that wants to pull the way I want to pull that can come on board. So I've referred people out. I've referred my own clients out to other coaches that I know multiple times in the past when I feel as though what their kind of needs don't really fall in the line of where I want to work anymore. That's happened a lot of times.
Yeah, I think that's a good lesson for a lot of coaches to take away. I'm going to switch gears a little bit because there's obviously been a lot about you and your kind of experiences and how you've kind of got to this present day. But I'm going to get to a bit more some of the technical questions now.
Yeah.
So our coach Charlie, he has a recomp specific question. So what he wanted to know is, when gaining muscle, how important or not is it, in your opinion, to do a phase of maintaining or recomposition at a new higher body weight? It's probably a lot more relevant for those physique athletes and slightly more advanced trainees.
Yeah, so I think, like, are we talking about at the end of a gaining phase?
Yeah.
So there'll always be, when someone's like pushing their body weight up and driving progressive training and obviously like a progressive food intake to eat within a surplus, which will increase over time as their training intensity increases and their body mass increases, which is why we need to obviously increase food incrementally over time within a phase like that. You'll always reach a point of diminishing return in regards to what you can get back when it comes to muscle accrual relative to like the ability to maintain body composition in an appropriate place. And when you say appropriate in inverted commas, like, that will differ between person to person, and there'll be people that will gain body fat and have storage patterns that are very prevalent, and there'll be people that can stay lean for quite a while if their kind of energy demands are very, very high. And there's a big genetic component as well, and it will differ between male and female as well. But generally speaking, the longer you push within a surplus, you are going to reach that line of diminishing return where you're not seeing as much basically progress in terms of whether that's performance or whether that's new lean tissue. And there'll be points where the amount of food that one needs to consume to continue pushing body weight up, that body weight just isn't necessarily going to be body weight you should be taking on. If it is largely coming from body fat, it doesn't really, suit with the purpose of the goal. And then you're kind of taking steps back, because then ultimately the more body fat you put on within this phase and less tissue, the more you're going to have to take off. So you're going to have to spend longer taking it off in the first place. So you're wasting time ultimately. And you're potentially, if you're spending longer times when the dieting phase, compromising your ability to hold on to progress. So like, my preferred way of doing it is push for as long as you can respond. And that will be individual dependent. And response is like seeing tangible progress, performance, visual change, body mass, body composition. And normally the limiting factor for a lot of people is just appetite. Like, they just won't be in a position where they can continue consuming the food they want to consume if they are heavily muscled individuals. But a lot of people, it's like, I just feel a bit too soft now, and I think I've pushed it a little bit too far. I need to tidy up. I think a really important thing, especially for more heavily muscled individuals, is once you've reached that threshold of where your kind of top tolerance is, I think it's very, very important not to pull down immediately. And something I've done with you in the past, Ross, is like we've pushed to those heights, but then we've held for a good handful of weeks, because you need to almost solidify the set points that you've moved to. Because if your previous high body weight within a gaining phase was, say, 90 kilos, and you've just pushed to 93 or 94, and the week you get to 94, you decide to tidy back up again, and you drop immediately from 94 back down straight away. Like, you've never held and owned that 94 kilo set point. And the longer you own a set point and continue pushing training, obviously the better that's going to look, and the better you're going to solidify that new muscle. So I think it's very, very important that when we look at recomposition, it doesn't just involve pushing to those new heights and then pulling immediately down. I think it's extremely important to solidify that for a period of time, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, however long it takes. Where basically that body weight is then stable at that food intake, and you can hold that body weight comfortably and then tidy up and then go again. Like, one thing that I used to do that I kind of learned not to do is that, like, I'd push people's body weights up. I'd get to a point where it's like, right, I'm not liking the look now. I think we've gone a bit too far, or I think if we push too far, it's not going to be productive. And I just start dieting them straight away. And I was like, why are they not holding on to that progress that we've just accrued? Or why is the look changing really, really quickly? And it was because we just haven't solidified that point they've just pushed up to.
Makes sense.
It's interesting though, because I think we often forget that homeostatic mechanisms take time to kind of establish themselves as well. And
yeah.
A number of those occurring at any given time, between sort of body fat and muscle tissue, and then of course how we handle and deal with different stressors and recovery and all these different factors that you're kind of, I suppose, trying to control for. Just a bit of an aside question, how would you find that would differ between assisted individuals and non-assisted individuals?
So, like, assisted individuals, Biggest difference would be obviously their ability to make progress in the first place in a shorter space of time. And I think as an assisted individual, when you are making that quicker progress, the ability to stay leaner whilst you're driving body weight up is most definitely a bigger viable possibility. When we look at assisted athletes, especially when they're driving those tools that would elicit more progress, especially when they're gaining very, very quickly, then it comes a management of like the ability to manage fluid and the ability to manage actually body mass, because fluid will increase as body weight increases to a rapid extent, regardless of what they're using. Like if food goes high and body weight goes high, you're going to get a lot of fluid with that. So like a big thing will be when we pull body weight down, that isn't just coming from the fat mass. There's going to be a lot of fluid that comes off as well as we start tidying up. So it's so important that if we've just solidified, like Josh Bridgman that I coached, you'll have seen, I posted photos the other day. Like he pushed up from prep and he was like maybe like high 80s, I think. And we pushed him to 116, 117. So like, I don't know, 25, 26 kilos in one push. And we held that for a good like 6 to 8 weeks. And the photos that we took when he first got to 116, 117 relative to what he looked like 8 weeks after were completely different. Like he was significantly leaner when we held that for 8 weeks. And now I can then pull him down to maybe 113, 112, solidifying that new muscle and then push back up again. So from an assisted perspective, like when we're approaching that in the right manner, it's very hard to lose muscle even if we're in a very large deficit, as long as we're training in some capacity. So I would potentially be more viable to be more aggressive within the recomp phases as well, and have more of kind of a rapid fat loss phase for those individuals where we get it done in maybe 4 weeks as opposed to 8 that I might take an unassisted athlete in. Just because it's a little bit more of a fragile process when we're not supporting those hormonal pathways, or we're just not supporting the retention of tissue just as well as we are in that other kind of enhanced hormonal state.
Nice. I mean, I think you've said this many times in the past, like, hypertrophy is very much a signaling dependent process. And as long as, I guess, like you say, you are providing the necessary signaling to hold on to muscle tissue, I can 100% understand why an assisted individual would potentially, like you say, find it pretty hard to lose tissue as long as they're training properly and you're still progressing the logbook, or at least holding the logbook whilst keeping the tissue and everything else. So it's good to hear that. So the next question actually comes from Mal, and it's a bit of a two-parter, this one, so she never makes things easy. So with the clients you work with, you tend to be able to guide clients through kind of multiple phases of composition change. And I think I can speak to that for myself because, it's been, I think, 14 months we've been going now. Personally, I know many of your clients, it's been over a number of years. So when it comes to these multiple phases of body composition change, whether it's in-season, off-season type approach for competitors, or say it's just helping clients build muscle with the necessary tidy up recomp phases along the way. Firstly, there's a thought process that each time someone diets down to get lean, they should be able to diet on higher calories. Do you tend to find that's the case, or does it more vary between individuals?
I think it varies a lot. I'm a perfect example of that because, and I've got a lot of clients that are the same. Like, there's a concept that, and you look at this in literature as well because it's been studied, where over time we can kind of build that metabolic ceiling of what we can consume relative to what we can get lean on. And I think in respect to just getting someone in good shape, I think it's more than possible that over time, as body mass increases and you actually increase the amount of lean tissue you have, your energy demands will increase as well. So what I was eating 3 years ago to look good, in my opinion, would have been less calories than what I'm eating now because I'm 50, 60 pounds heavier. And it would be the same if it was on a much smaller scale as well. But from personal experience, when I look at like stage competitors, or even people going for photo shoots, when they want to get to like the extremes of body composition, regardless of where their off-season calories are, they're going to have to go just as low to get it back off again. Like in prep, like I finished on, my high days were like 2,100 calories and my low days were like 1,500. And that was like, I'm bigger than most of my other clients, and I was dieting on no food whatsoever. And it was the same, like Josh last year his low days were like 1,600 calories, and he's a big dude. Like females can obviously, from an energy demands perspective and a little bit less muscle, can be even lower. So I think get it like from a general pop, or just a general kind of client that wants to do photo shoots and just look great. I think that caloric set point can definitely increase over time relative to their progress and the amount of muscle mass. But to get people to like the extremes of body composition, you're going to have to go pretty low regardless of where you are, like regardless of the time scale.
And I think that's super interesting, isn't it? Have you got something you want to add?
Yeah, I've not dieted that many times, but I've done it a few times. So it's been quite long between each time. So generally, each time I've dieted, the actual dieting calories have been fairly similar each time. But what I have noticed is that my maintenance calories are higher now, a lot higher now than they were before.
Yeah.
So I can eat a lot more and still look good. Like I don't have to be as restricted from that point of view, but still to get lean, I still have to go down to the same ranges that I had before, which for me tends to be between like 1500, 1800, depending on how active I am.
Yeah.
It's super interesting, because I think, like you mentioned, Cal, like it's this kind of idea that, and you often see this with a lot of gym pop clients who achieve like one of those kind of jaw-dropping transformations. They often have to lose so much more body weight, body mass than they think they do to get to that kind of low weight. And I think obviously then it just makes sense then that calories are going to have to come down to accommodate that. And then, like you said, with the having more muscle tissue, it then of course makes more sense as well that at least at maintenance, potential is going to settle at a higher end. If you're a bigger individual, alone your BMR is going to be sitting higher than it was, albeit maybe not by as much as we think, because we know that muscle tissue doesn't actually help you to burn, quote unquote, as many calories. But I guess that overlooks the kind of whole metabolic benefits of having much more tissue and who you can drive during your training and everything else. Should we launch into part 2 of your question?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, so we know that energy balance is a moving target rather than a fixed number. I remember Luke Leeman saying that, and I think that's so spot on, because a lot of people often think they calculate their needs. Now that's my calories. It's like, that's such a moving target all the time based on God knows how many factors. So when switching gears during coaching, I suppose we've anecdotally found for some clients that they have a very narrow maintenance range, and for others they may actually have quite a wide maintenance range. So what have you found with that, and what do you think contributes to that?
Well, in terms of like energy balance in general, like energy demands in general changing.
Yeah,
that
just
point of going from like maintaining your composition to like gaining weight, gaining muscle versus dieting. Because I found for me, like I have to go, and I'm not super low, but fairly low to actually start to get leaner. But then whenever I've done like focused, I'm going to try and gain weight, like gain muscle, I have to eat so much. Like I feel like there's such a big, like my ability to maintain and not get anywhere, like it's fairly broad, but to kind of push the envelope either way, it's like a big difference between those numbers or the amount.
Whereas for me, it's a bit different. I tend to find that my range isn't quite so large. It's like it's quite within a short range, quite easy for me to start putting on weight or to start going down. But whereas for her, it's almost as if there's this like 600 calorie gulf between the point she'd actually see weight going down and going up.
It's even more than that. Like when I was working with Nathan before, like the amount of food I had to eat, and I was like, why am I not getting fatter? Like, why am I not getting at least, versus, So I was just interested in what you've noticed in terms of.
There's going to be a lot of individuality there, and like just from like coaching a wide number of people, there is definitely more tolerance from some than others. Like I think a lot of it will come down to just overall like the dictators of energy balance. So like where someone is in their training, what's their volume, what's the daily activity, like just general thermic things that are going to be within their lifestyle that are going to burn calories and make them have a greater metabolic output. Because we got to think like there are contributing factors in energy balance, and obviously subconsciously, like we don't necessarily realize things consciously, but like just things like increasing step count like innately without knowing, or increasing training volume innately without knowing, or it's little things that we don't know we're necessarily doing on a day-to-day basis that can change things. But I think there is a large genetic component when it comes to just the likes of like how BMR is programmed within individuals relative to their body mass, that will allow for a bigger scope for some people than others. Like Ross, for example, you said your tolerance is quite a small window, and I've got clients like there are loads of clients where I'll start a dieting phase, and I'll bring them from what I feel as though was like their peak off-season calories, and I'll pull it down by and it changes from person to person. And usually I gradually pull it down until I feel at a point where they're not gaining weight. Right, I'm going to think they're going to lose weight pretty soon, and then it will be like 6 weeks before they've even lost a pound of body weight when I've been decreasing calories every single week. But there are also people where I'll pull their calories down by 500 and they'll immediately be in a deficit. So like, to say why, I couldn't put a tangible reason to why, but there are obviously multiple factors that go into that. And I think, as you said before, in terms of my maintenance calories seems to increase every time I kind of diet and then push back up. I think that is relative to body mass, but it's also relative to every time you get lean, you're going to be able to gain more weight and stay leaner just because of the storage patterns that you basically removed or got very, very lean in the dieting process. They're not going to come back at the same rate they did previously, and they're not going to be, from a storage pattern perspective, especially with females, they're not going to be coming back on at the same rate they were originally, if that makes sense. So the leaner you get in a dieting phase, the leaner you're going to stay at a body weight when you increase that. Like post-show, after my show, I gained like 60, 70 pounds of body weight and I was still lean. I was looking at first like, how is this even possible? Like last time I was at this body weight, I was really, really fat. Not fat, but like fat for what I'd consider to be me in shape. And it is just a case of when you take yourselves to those limits, like the body is in such a responsive state to take on nutrients, take on food and actually gain body weight and keep fat mass at a minimum. It's going to take a lot for that to start gaining. But then once it starts gaining, it's then a quicker process, if that makes sense. Like you'll stay lean for ages, and then there'll be like, as soon as you're in a relative surplus for maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks, it just all piles on. And those metabolic like discrepancies are going to be massive.
Be quite interested or excited to when it's our turn to go through that process, because we haven't done that yet, obviously.
Yeah.
Sort of optimization, strength focus space. So, and I reckon when things open up, I'll go back to that for a while, but then to actually go through like more of a focused dieting phase and then to rebuild again, I'd be quite excited to do that.
Yeah, 100%. It's really interesting because I've got this wrong in terms of judgment with clients before, where we've kind of mapped out the year in terms of shows, and we mapped out when they need to start dieting. So like, I like to put things in an Excel folder and like in an Excel file and map out what the events are for the year and how we need to kind of map back in terms of timings. And I'll give them like normally for most people, I'll say like a 20-week diet into a show prep. So it gives us time to experiment with what we need to experiment with. And it gives us time to trial loads, etc. And there'll be people that I've coached that the first 8 weeks of prep, like they haven't lost barely any weight. And I'm like looking at the spreadsheet, like what the hell is going on? And then they'll get to a point where their calories will get to a certain limit and then it will just start plummeting. And that's what I call like a swoosh effect, where it's like you've held for a long, long time. And then you get to a certain tolerance where you're manipulating energy balance and calories, and it just starts flying off. It happens all the time. And that kind of, even when we're controlling things like steps, training volume, we're in control of everything that's relative to energy expenditure. So we know where they are in the grand scheme of things, but there's just like such a large window of them holding. And then like the smallest of change will just make everything to start plummeting off. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah. To something that you say all the time, we've actually been saying a lot for clients recently, is this idea of focusing on the process-based goals rather than the outcome-based goals. So
yeah,
it's easy in those situations to get really demotivated, especially if you maybe get guys that are on you're kind of like a 24-week prep or whatever else, and they maybe feel like 4 weeks around, 6 weeks around, Jesus, like I'm running out of time, and they get really impatient. Yeah. But as long as they keep, like you always talk about, ticking the boxes, doing the work,
exactly,
that process, I think that's so key. So I guess this takes us on to our last question, really. So an area that you seem to be quite specialised in seems to be the understanding of female physiology. It's certainly something you're quite well known for amongst other coaches in the industry. What led you to being interested in this area, and at what stage does it become relevant for a coach to kind of make tweaks and adjustments to their female clients' plans based on the physiological changes that they experience throughout their menstrual cycle?
I think every coach, male or female, needs to have at least a foundational grasp of what's occurring there and how the implications it should have on the way they're viewing weekly feedback, the way they're programming nutrition, and the way they're programming training, potentially how they're managing recovery, and just being in a position where you can actually be understanding of the situation and not overlook the obvious when it comes to what those varying hormones are doing. And even when it comes to like birth control, like being able to understand like what's actually happening there with clients that are using birth control, how that's going to impact body composition, how that's going to impact other things. So I think every single coach should have at least a basic understanding of that. I think what led me down to that path was, it was always something that we used to, it was a reoccurring topic that we used to basically discuss in team meetings at M10. And that kind of led me to first start to dig into like Lyle's stuff and Lyle's book and different content from different people producing that stuff. And then one thing led to another. Obviously, we started the educational platform. My fiance Hannah, she was without a cycle for the first time the first few years that we met, and just even that in terms of looking at stress and looking at what's happening physiologically there. Because I wasn't coaching her, but I was like giving her guidance on what she should do. You can't really coach your girlfriend, can you? It doesn't work very well most of the time. Yeah, I was giving her guidance. And then she throws something at me. But giving her guidance as to what she could do to kind of optimize these things to start to bring back that into a regular fashion. And seeing her go through that process and regaining control of her cycle with the stuff that we manipulated kind of lit the fire in terms of like, this is really interesting now. And I was seeing it before with clients like all those years ago, but I didn't understand why. I didn't understand why things were happening. I didn't understand why their cycle was irregular. I didn't understand those things. I didn't understand why they come into the gym for a PT session at a certain week and they wouldn't want to train, or their energy was low, or their performance was low. I was like, this is pissing me off. Like, I need to understand why, and I can do something about it. And I think that's a big thing as part of a coach. Like, the stuff you don't get at the start should be like the inquisitive bit of your mind should be like, if I don't get it, I should probably find out why I don't get it and learn about it. Because then one day I will know, and I will know what to do. And that's a big part of learning as a coach. Like, there's going to be loads of stuff you don't get at the start, but write that down and then make sure you learn about it when you figure out what you don't get. That was kind of one thing led to another, and then the kind of studying side of things came in, and we've got obviously a big part of the education portal is female phys. And I've kind of put, I think, the first like 8 to 10 lectures of that on. We've also got Joe Jeffrey, who I think you'll know, who's coming on board as a guest speaker, and he's digging into some of the research on birth control and stuff, which would be really cool. So it's kind of been a little bit of like personal experience with Hannah, but also the more I study, the more interested I've become in that. Because I think from a coaching perspective, especially with female clients, if you can understand that stuff from the start, you'll gain female clients' rapport very, very quickly, because the amount of coaches they'll have had in the past that just don't get that stuff, it's a massive, I think Mal will probably say this, like, it's a big barrier if you go to a coach and they're trying to like say something about the menstrual cycle and they're like, oh, they're just trying to skip over it because they don't know. Like, that would be a big barrier for a lot of people. So when you understand that stuff, it's like it's a big welcoming thing. It's a very personable thing that, you know, somebody should understand, and that should reflect within their coaching. So yeah, like for all junior coaches coming up in the ranks, like that should be, I don't know why it isn't taught like in your diploma at PT, because it's so important for female clients. That should be like a foundational thing, just like understanding the basics of exercise mechanics should be. Like physiology and female physiology should be a big thing as well, foundationally.
Yeah, it's something, even since we started working together, that with myself, I haven't really thought much about, but I am paying more attention to that now. Like, I'm starting to noticing some more trends, like when, you know, you're in that luteal phase, like that last week, how I feel slightly different, but I wouldn't have thought about that before. But I would always listen to my body, and like, I think naturally, just, you know, when I'm feeling more sore or weak or whatever, I'd adjust to that. But now it's nice to be a bit more prepared for that in advance, and, you know, sort of be a bit more active in the process. And yeah, I actually feel a bit warmer now, or a bit more hungry, or, you know, I feel like I don't suffer from PMS like bad. I don't really feel like I struggle a lot compared to what many females or other females might do, but I still notice something, you know. So it's good to be more aware of that.
And that says a lot, because you're quite, I would kind of class you as being quite in touch with your biofeedback and your body. But it's amazing how many, you know, female coaches you maybe speak to, and it's amazing how many of them actually don't have, first of all, a very, you know, healthy potential cycle or patterns or symptomology, and then second, like you said, they maybe don't even have quite as much knowledge themselves about what's really going on. So I think just getting even more females, and of course male coaches who work with females, just a bit more clued up on that side of things. I think that would save a lot of hassle and a lot of tears for a lot of female clients out there.
I think that from a female client perspective, for the people that I've worked with that haven't known like the terminology and the ins and outs of like ovarian cycle, like they subconsciously recognize all those elements of it because they felt them, but they can't necessarily pinpoint them to why. Whereas when you kind of fill in those boxes and make them understand, right, this is why this is happening, this is what's happening. Like, it's a light bulb moment. And then, like Mal said, you become so much more self-aware, and you can start to predict these things, and you don't freak out when they're happening because you kind of know they're going to come. And then we can start mapping things out and filling out data over time, so we can look at, right, these are the fluctuations we see. This is probably what's going to happen here. Don't freak out if your weight goes up. Don't freak out if your strength goes down. Like, it's a big thing you can build into coaching. And I think a lot of females kind of know it subconsciously, but then, a lot of the time can't pinpoint why it's happening in the first place, relative to like what ovarian hormones dominant, or what part of the cycle they're in. They just kind of know what's going on because they just felt it before.
Yeah, just recognizing that. I think for me, I've been a bit worried that I'd put things like, oh well, I'm approaching this time, so I'm going to start feeling weaker, or I'm going to start feeling hungry. And I think, even because I've been aware of this before we started working together, and I thought I'd rather not think about that, because I'd worry that I'd that self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit. But
I get that. 100%.
And I think, oh, I'm going to feel like this, so I'm going to eat more.
Yeah, it's like
so I think, so I mean, I know it's real. I know that these things are real, but I think I've not been wanting to focus on them because of that actually happening. But I feel like that hasn't really happened. But if anything, I'm just, I'm still listening to my body, but it's, as I said, a little bit less of maybe like a shock, or okay, I can be a bit more kinder on myself maybe if I'm feeling a bit, like last week I was really feeling it from that, like knowing that my period was approaching and stuff. So it was a bit fine. I'm going to feel better now this week, or so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a really cool takeaway point for a lot of the coaches who listen to this podcast is this idea of kind of staying constantly curious and constantly hungry for filling in gaps of your knowledge. I mean, certainly for me, you probably remember this, Cal, the one and only kind of private call outside of our coaching that I've done with you, it was on female physiology. And
I remember, yeah.
And I think I have to still probably go back and watch that a third time just to keep filling in the gaps. But certainly for me, that ignited my kind of, well, actually this is an area I really don't have as much knowledge in as I feel like I should. So that's a great lesson for coaches, is just like stay hungry, stay curious, because you never know that you might find your niche or your kind of path that you actually want to pursue with a little bit more detail, a little bit more. So let's get into because we're approaching that kind of 1 hour mark, let's dive into the quick fire round. So as Cal has absolutely no idea what questions are coming at him, it's literally different for every single guest. And it allows the listener to just hopefully get to know Cal on a little bit more of a personal level. Ready, Cal?
Go for it.
Shoot.
All right. Brownies or donuts?
Oh, brownies. I'm a big fan of brownies, and flapjacks as well.
So am I. So you're a donuts person, aren't you? There you go.
Yeah.
Have you been to Nottingham Donut Shop?
Nope.
The what, sorry?
Nottingham Donut Store. The big donut store in Nottingham.
All right, no. It's like, are they in Dubai?
No, they're not.
Search them on Instagram. They're pretty spectacular.
Yeah, where we go next time, if we go and visit Cal, we need to go to there.
I know.
Best Monster Energy flavour?
What? It's still white.
Nice, there we go. You have no idea what that is, do you? It's a big thing in the kind of physique scene at the moment, isn't it? The kind of Rain drink and the Monster Energy.
I still prefer Monster over Rain, but the Monster Green was probably a close second, but White Ultra is still the best.
There you go. Favourite meal out?
Oh, probably steak and sweet potato fries.
So it's a safe one. It's a safe one.
It's basically what we had when we had dinner in Dubai, remember?
Yeah, there you go. Cool. It's a good choice then.
It's a very good choice. Captain America or Iron Man?
Ooh, Iron Man.
Controversial one. Best Olympia physique?
Best Olympia physique? I probably have to go with the OG of Ronnie Coleman in his prime. There are a few, but you can't beat Ronnie in his prime. Nobody can.
He's an absolute animal, wasn't he? Absolute animal. Favorite exercise?
Favorite exercise? Anything to do with the deadlift.
Pretty much anything.
Yeah, probably.
There you go. Most despised exercise?
Front squat. Just because of the fact I can't actually breathe when I do it, but I still do it anyway.
It's got to be done. But I was going to say, it's not a big guy friendly exercise. There's a lot of arm and muscle to get in the way there.
So bad.
if you could only travel to one place post-COVID, where would it be?
I'm going to say Dubai. Like I love. Well, we've already said like when travel opens again, we'll come to Dubai straight away because I love it.
I was hoping you'd say that. Dubai is awesome.
That's a good choice then, isn't it? And who should we have on the podcast next?
I'm going to say I would do. Do you do joint podcasts?
We could do. We haven't yet, but
I would do a mechanics-based podcast or a training-based podcast with James and Luke. Because as a duo, as both educators, that would work really well.
You'd love that, wouldn't you?
I'd
that'd be like heaven for you.
Heaven for me. If they'd be willing to come on, then I'd be more than happy.
Yeah, they'd love to do.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thanks so much for coming on, Cal. And I just want to commend you first for since being a brilliant role model for other coaches in the industry, both from generally as a general coach, but also in terms of coaching physique athletes in a smart and considered way.
That's amazing, mate. No, thank you.
Of course. And where is the best place for people to find you?
If you just put in the Muscle Mentors, I think everything we're affiliated with is now on that. So we finally got to #1 on Google search after about 2-3 months of trying to get the website at the top, without even doing any search engine optimization. So I'm taking that as a win. Because everyone was like, oh, you need to pay someone to do this, you need to pay someone to do that. We've never done it, but it's neat to make its way to the top anyway. And then like social media is just, if you put the Muscle Mentors in and then it's our first name and you'll find us all.
Yeah, it's usually first name and then underscore and then the Muscle Mentors, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Brilliant. Well, listen, guys, for those that are listening in as well, thank you for tuning in. The best way you can support Better Body Radio is to go onto Apple iTunes, leave us a 5-star review, and if there's anything specific that Cal said during this podcast that resonated with you, drop us a comment in there as well. And once again, Cal, thanks very much. It'd be great to have you back on a future episode.
100%. Thank you. My pleasure, guys.